thank you for initializing this day, this guest coming from far away from India, which also made a nice story of your trip to India 2 years ago. So it's my pleasure to thank you and to greet our guest. I give later words to Vlado, so he will introduce you in proper way because I think he knows you much better than I would say a few sentences. So thank you for coming. It's a pleasure for having you here. And I think it will be interesting to see how it's working in India because I think it's the easiest way for us to maybe realize what's important for us, maybe what's our uniqueness of our country and our town according to absolutely different culture from ours here, from Europeans. So thank you for coming. I'm looking forward to hear your, of course, and Vlada's words about this interesting stuff. So thank you. And at the end, it's in Croatian, but I prepared a few, I would say, important publications from the Center for Culture. So it's for you, maybe for your flight or home to read a bit, and you can use Google Translate. I think we have enough applications that can translate, so if you find something interesting, I hope you will enjoy in parts.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The pleasure is really mine. Being here, I love it already, and thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, and the public, please enjoy it.
Thank you.
I give words to Vlado. Vlado, here you go.
Hvala lijepo, Maja. Hvala Maja za ovu mogućnost. Hvala svima koji su došli, drago mi je da se vidimo u ovom broju. Naravno, kako je došlo do naše suradnje, do Arjunove i moje suradnje? Vidio sam jednu informaciju na Instagramu gdje ona nagovještava njegov dolazak u Hrvatsku u travnju i svibnju. Prvo sam ja malo informirao se ko je on i onda mi je palo na pamet, joj, možda bi bilo dobro da nekaj napravimo skromnoga čast, jer sam se sjetio da sam ja bio 2017. u Indiji, a to nitko ovdje ne zna, odnosno nisam nikad to pokazivao ovdje, pa sam mislim možda bi nam to moglo biti zanimljivo da malo surađujemo na taj način i Arjun je bio voljan da to činimo. Navodno ćemo se još poslije družiti 25. travnja kod Franje, ako Bog da. Tamo ćemo, smijem to reći, jel Franjo, organizirati opet druženje na Trini.
Peti put.
Peti put, da, već peti put, to sam zaboravio. A onda će naš gost također biti Arjun, on će isto sama slika, tako da znate i vi da već tu budete došli tog dana i da povedete svoje društvo. Ok, ja sam tu pripremio nekoliko fotografija, ja ću gledati to relativno brzo, samo da vidite otprilike kaj se događalo. Ja sam poznan, budem gost i slikom sa studentima je birala Barvika Pilani u Rajastanu. Onda sam se opet sjetio kad sam bio ponovno, pa da, dobro bi bilo da posjetim isto frendove tamo u New Delhiju, Viveka Kaljana i u Puneu, to je tam nedaleko od Bombaja, je Sudhir Sharma, moj dobar friend, isto s kojim se znamo 2006. iz Amana, kad smo radili zajedno. On je pak jedan od nepoznatih grafičkih dizajnera i izdavača časopisa koji ima veze sa umjetnošću i likovnim i grafičkim dizajnom. Dakle, prvo sam bio u Delhiju od frenda, malo smo išli se slikati sa ovim važnim stražarom gore. Da, dogovorili smo se, Arjun i ja smo se dogovorili da će on možda ovo malo prekomentirati poslije, baš me zanima kako će on to doživjeti. Ovo su dvije cure kćerke od Viveka Kaljana, kod njih sam ostavljeno dva dana. Ova Manja, ona je talentirana umjetnica, pa smo crkali i slikali zajedno, ona je mene portretirala, ja nju. Bio sam fasciniran sa tom njihovom arhitekturom. To su one dvije, ovo je njihova mama, a ovo je njihov tata. išli smo na neku feštu boja, festival of colors, do you know? That was there, you know. Yeah, they took me with me. And this boy was, he cried, you know, he was very, very sad, so I had to pay attention. Da, tu smo kod njih Roma, sad ja portretiram ovu stariju, curu, mlađe portretira mene. Njihov tata me odveo u jedan whisky bar, jednu večer i onda tako malo sam se rasplesao po najboljim danima u Ivanskoj, u Gravovnici, zna Dupor, zna Franjo, znaju dečki. Da, to je bilo čudo veliko, pitali su tko sam, odakle sam s koje planete sam se pojavio tamo. I onda je Ivek to pričao doma njegove ženke da sam iduće večer morao kod njih doma privatno plesati, jer žene je tam bila neke susrete, taj mislim, bilo je zanimljivo. A to je Ivek u Lichtensteinu, u muzeju gdje sam radio sam od 2003. do 2022. u Zemaljskom muzeju u Lichtensteinu, on nas je jednom posjetio. To smo opet, dakle, na tom festivalu boja. Mislim, to je nevratno, to treba doživjeti, ne da se opisati. Mislim da bi tu uživalo tom keramikom. Tu smo onda kušali klopicu.
Where was this?
This was good.
Where was this?
Inside festival, this was part of this movement. Young people on the streets. Ovo je bilo zanimljivo. Vozili smo se u noći, ovo su kolegice umjetnice, ovo su dečki tam na jednoj benzinskoj pumpi, negdje u noći smo stali na benzinskoj pumpi i na otvorenoj vatri to se pila kava i ono. Kad dođeš iz Lichtensteina ili Švicarske, ono, na tako mjesto misliš, odletit ćemo svi u zrak, ono. To mi je bilo fora. Ovdje smo u Pilaniju. Ovo su kolegice umjetnice, ovo je Babita Das. Ona je međunarodno ovako dosta aktivna i putovala je dosta po svijetu. Ona je organizirala zajedno sa njezinim suprugom cijelu tu akciju. Ovo sam ja u univerzitetu, to je slika koja još nije bila gotova, koju sam slikao tam na licu mjesta. A ne znam da li je uopće bila gotova jer sam zadnja 3 dana neke je bio bolestan, pa sam morao ležati sam na krevetu. To je jedna od studentica, tu su bili studenti s kojima sam slikao, a njoj sam pričao o spiralnim kanalima, mojim isto životnim djelom, pa je onda ona isto kao spiralama neke radila. U ovoj sami sam držao predavanje, tu se vrti film, ovdje gdje sam ja sam tamo zadar i snimam ovdje to sve, tu su malo pokrenuli plešu. Ovo su neka vrsta mažoretkinja njihovih tamo u univerzitetu. I don't know, they have once in the year some celebration in their university and then
Probably around Republic Day, January.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't remember anymore which time was.
So this is part of the Scottish, the British heritage.
Yeah, maybe. And so, tamo mi salutiramo sa strane, tu smo svi zajedno se fotkali. Ja sam kao obično vidio u sredini. Na kraju smo dobivali poklončiće i završna ceremonija, svečanost i onda su folklori su predstavili sa svih krajeva Indije, pa je to bilo jako šareno, jako zanimljivo, to je da, to bi trebalo vidjeti jer imamo naravno veliki raspon folklora, zbilja jako bogati, ali kad se to naravno spoji sa jednom Indijom, onda je to nezamislivo čak možda. Da, tu smo bili primljeni kod ravnateljice univerziteta, gospođa tam lijevo od mene. To su nastavnice, profesorica, profesor, jako simpa ljudi, svi skupo baš bilo onako, sa srcem smo bili primljeni. Na tim arhitekturama tamo sam vidio i ovakve znakove koje znamo zbog čega je totalno predstavljen neki drugi simbol. Ta znanje su arhitektura, mislim, fenomenalno zanimljiva. I onda bilo nam je rečeno da netko ima svadbu, pa nas je pitao da li bi htjeli ići malo pogledati kakav je to običaj sad. Onda smo se zaletili tam i onda sam malo počeo plesati s njima, pa su me htjeli zadržati cijelu noć. Nisam se dao jer nisam baš više bio u godinama kojima bi mogli podesti nekoga kaj cijelu noć. Što plesati je bilo jako zanimljivo da te prekrasne zgrade, arhitekture i to. I onda sam letao u Pune. Ovo je moj friend Sudhio. On je u nekom, barem u jednom broju tog svojega časopisa je pisao o meni, onak se izvršavao na tom mojem projektu Spiralni kanali, kojeg sam realizirao 11 puta u 10 europskih zemalja i prezentirao u Kini i u Južnoj Koreji i ne znam gdje ono više ne, u Dubaju u jednom. To je ovak Sunset, ulice. Nikad se ne bi usudio tam voziti auto, po ulicama nema šanse. Onda omaknike su vidi su na ulicama. Ovdje smo bili onda u jednom baru, ovdje DJ-i, popili smo pivice. Ovo je Sudhir, a ona tamo je njegova supruga, ona dolazi iz Ukrajine, isto grafički dizajner. Ovo su njihovi prijatelji. Evo ovo je unutra u toj časopisu je objavljivalo priču. Ovdje smo privatno kod njega doma, kod njih doma. Ovo desno je tata od Sudhira, ovo moja čerka. Ovdje smo bili na večeri, ovdje desno je mama od Sudhira. Njegova čerka sa frendicom, kad su studirali u Europi, su posjetili isto Lichtenstein jedan put, pa sam ih opet odvedio naravno u muzej i upoznat tam s nekim kolegicama, umjetnicama i napravili jedan video za kanal, YouTube kanal Lichtensteinskog muzeja, jer ja sam bio jedini koji je vodio i organizirao YouTube kanal. Prvih jedno 5-6 godina sam ja bio jedini koji se bavi time. I bilo mi je dopušteno da radim kako hoću, tako da direktora neću nikad više imati. 28.11.2018. je Sudhir bio specijalni gost istog muzeja, zato jer je tamo je 100. jubilejumski nastavak sa časopisa Pul prezentirao. I ovdje sam sposlovao da imam intervju sa jednom kolegicom iz Slovenije i to je prilike to kad sam ja htio reći o mojem putovanju. Nije bilo dugo, tu negdje 10 minuta, to smo se dogovorili. Sad, ću da predstavim samo, on je prvo završao nuklearnu fiziku, a poslije je studirao u Londonu umjetnost, sad vodi jedan kulturni centar u New Delhiju koji se zove Crvena kuća, Red House. Tamo ima puno gostiju, mislim da će o tome on sam pričati, budemo se dobro razumjeli, da ja ne duljim puno o temi. Može? Dobro došao. Welcome to give your show.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, and it was a real pleasure seeing his photographs as well, which I am seeing for the first time. So, as Glaudo let you know, my background is quite diverse in that I studied nuclear physics. I went on to study painting. I studied nuclear physics at IIT Roorkee, which is in the foothills of the Himalayas. And my painting was done in the UK mostly, at St. Martin's. And for the last 4 years I've been running this cultural center in Delhi by the name of Red House. And we have catered to almost 13,000 people in the last 4 years and done about 150 cultural programs. So I'm quite experienced in both the sciences and the arts, and architecture, of course, also. And I am very pleased to be here. In Croatia, it feels like it feels like a meditation. That's what I was telling you as well, because the scales at which we are operating are extremely different. To give you an idea about just how different this is, I was reading this last week. The airport in Delhi is actually capable of accommodating the entire Croatian population. The airport in just the capital can accommodate the entire Croatian population. So in terms of scale, it is unbelievably different. If you would be going to India, I guarantee that you this kind of quite shock to your senses, it is bound to happen, as it is happening to me as well. Because the amount of silence that I am experiencing here in Chazman, I am not getting at all. It is like I don't need to do anything. It is constant meditation all day long throughout. Just need to step out of my house and it is that's where I am. Yes, let's begin. A little bit about India. This is Gandhi. Gandhi, of course, would be probably the best known Indian outside of India. Rabindranath Tagore, if you are looking for any good Indian poetry, I very highly recommend. I will end my presentation today with a poem, in fact, by Tagore. And this is a still from one of the very good 1970s films called Mughal-e-Azam. And the actress is Madhubala. But why I have this here is because I was lecturing at Spud yesterday morning in Zagreb, and one of the students told me that she had read somewhere where half the gold in the world is actually on the bodies of Indian women, because they just love their jewelry so much. Right, from head to toe, it seems like for every body part they have jewelry. And we will see some examples of that as well. So, India, right? As soon as you enter India, this blinding energy, it is very much there. And not only you can corroborate on that, but it is very clear. As soon as you enter, it is this. So, for instance, Charles was like meditation. This the Indian experience is like this constant, almost psychedelic trip, which never ends. You are sucked into it, and it will never stop. It is this very constant stimulation of all different kinds of music, color, sense. It is happening all the time. It is the sea of humanity that is constantly just coming out of nowhere. The energy is incredible. In terms of diversity, it is bound to happen. We were talking about the scales of India, but you should think of India not as a country, but really as a continent. We have 22 officially recognized languages, and unofficially, of course, there are probably around somewhere between 500 to 700 languages within one country. So single states would most definitely be bigger than even 4 or 5 European countries altogether. Right? It is that kind of scale that we're talking about. This is from the Ajanta and Ellora caves in Maharashtra. And this will date probably 2000 years ago. This is a very favorite childhood memory of mine. This is a fresco of the Bodhisattva, Padmapani. This, of course, is the Taj Mahal. And this also is very interesting. Of course, as you can see, it is an erotic sculpture. This is 1,000 years old. This is part of the Khajuraho complex in Madhya Pradesh. And why I have this over here is that it's quite interesting in that 1,000 years ago, this is pre-Islamic India, because we've had about 600, 700 years of Muslim rule from the 11th century to the early 17th century, after which we had 300 years of British rule. Before that was pre-Islamic India. But in pre-Islamic India, there is this idea of the sacred and the secular being very intimately connected. This is the facade of a temple. Right? It wasn't anything out of the ordinary to have the erotic lead you to God. Right? If you go to Varanasi, which is a 5,000 years old, continuously inhabited city, there the same thing is being approached through death. death is one journey through to God. Right? All the temples everywhere, you have these 24 hours burning funeral pyres. You have that all the time, everywhere. And that is in fact, I as an Indian myself, for the first time realized how death is to be understood as a part of life, not apart from life. It is not the ending or the culmination of life, but as much a part of life as life itself. So these kinds of experiences are quite common if you are open to them in India. Now this I've thought about quite a lot in my journey as an artist. This is an image of Kali, which is the female principle of the universe, but turned demonical. Of course, this is entrapped in a Cartesian plane. So what we are dealing with in modern India is this overlap of complete irrationality, which is not unhealthy. It is a different kind of rationality, but superimposed onto that is this I would say British kind of structure, right? Where everything needs to be categorized cleanly, named, labeled, and it's of course producing a lot of effects. So there are a lot of differences in Western and Indian art, but one of the main ones I found is this. So you know how in paintings, on sculptures in the West, artists would sign their names, right? That is not a practice. In most of India, for most of the time, that has just not been the case. Art, culture was just another profession. There is no idea, no conception of an artist wanting to stamp their names on their work. If you would personally ask them just why, they would usually invoke the name of some god, that it is on their behalf that I'm doing this, but there is no need to stamp their own identity onto it. So that is one very basic difference I've seen. So most Indian art, you would never know who the actual artist was. It is not a concept. They will not sign their names. The apathy for classification, of course, I think it's a very British thing to classify and to categorize. If you consider the example of a butterfly, let's say, I would think that Western thought, or let's say English thought, where that would capture the butterfly, clip its wings, dissect it, label it, and pin it onto the wall. The Indian mind is, I think, much more poetic in that it will let it live. It will study it from a poetic, maybe vague kind of way. It will do that, but it will let it live. The idea of categorization is not very strong, I feel. Religiosity as well is a very interesting one. When I was in the UK, very interestingly, one of the most common questions to me was whether I was religious or not. And I feel to an Indian mind the question does not make sense. Of course, for them the question simply meant whether I went to church or not. If I went to church, that means I believe in God and yada yada yada. But I think to the Indian mind it doesn't really make sense. I really need not go to the church, need not go to a temple. But the idea of me being irreligious is inconceivable. I don't understand it, how it is even possible. I would cease to exist. It's just not there. Pessimism as well. So my own understanding is that, so why Kali here? Indian time is generally divided into these very big eras called yugas. And right now is what is going on, or what's going on is the Kali Yuga, is the era of Kali, is the era of this goddess, of the female principle turned demonic. And this kind of pessimism is accepted through and through. It's like this very cowboyish kind of maturity, where it's almost like the West is undergoing this teenage rebellion, where we are seeing all these different disturbances throughout the world. We would like to raise our voices, shout, scream at the top of our voices, protest. Whereas I think in India what's happening is that there is this idea of maturity, that this is going on, but we know that this is meant to happen, and we can see through it. So there is this idea of pessimism. You will very, very commonly see this in the streets. Something bad is happening and people will just say to you that this is Kali Yuga, so let's get on with it, let's deal with it. But it's a kind of mature pessimism, I would say. Of course, there are problems in the Indian landscape, and I would love to learn from you as well whether some of these resonate with what is happening in Croatia. But overall, it is this deep-set servitude to the West. It's like, when you play the guitar and you are suddenly made aware of the notes that you're playing, that is when you start making mistakes. I think modern India really is facing exactly that, in that we have become conscious of our own selves and we have begun committing mistakes. The song that was playing for millennia, it's a very beautiful song, but it's starting to make mistakes now because we have become aware of ourselves and we are playing with a system to audiences which are not really in complete understanding of what's going on. So if you look at Indian classical music, for example, as well, it is not notated as in the West. There is a very strong utility of notation, of course, but it's not there in the Indian system. Now what is happening is that these Indian classical musicians, they will force themselves to adopt the Western notation and they will then start making mistakes and the music will lose its quality as well. That kind of spontaneity which jazz has as well, you lose them. The language, the English language is a very big thing. You notice that I am speaking in English as well, and I would say this, most Indians would not have as good a level of English as I have. It is a sad fact, but all my education was in the English medium because of course I was in Delhi, the capital. But it's this very sad, I don't even know, but this lingering on of the British in India, that we have begun thinking in English. We are thinking about Indian things in English. So I'm very happy when I come to places like Croatia and I see that common day, every day, the presentations, these are happening in Croatian, the local languages. I am actually very, very happy about that. Because this sort of thing in Delhi would in fact be happening in English. The common language which people are speaking would be Hindi, or one of these 500 to 700 languages throughout the country, but the presentations would all be happening in English. That is the sad part. There are attempts at solutions. The government is trying to do things. There are all these craft fairs, these craft emporia. But as I've learned in Croatia as well, there is this attempt at reinterpreting history, right? Rewriting the textbooks, renaming different streets, because it's almost like they don't want to accept what we already have and they would like to rewrite it. Which is something everyone recognizes, but it is still happening. Well, this is good. So this is the kind of, this is an electric pole system, and I'm sure if you went to old Delhi especially, this is incredible because, and we as Indians laugh at this as well, because it is complete chaos. It's incredible to us, to ourselves as well, how this is even going on. It is complete chaos throughout the country, and it is still going on. It is unbelievable for millennia, for thousands of years. This is still going on. Now, so we talk about India as a whole, now focusing on to Delhi, which is my city, the capital of India. William Dalrymple calls it the city of jinns. Jinns are the Islamic fairies, spirits. If you have read Aladdin, haven't you read? So the genie, William Dalrymple calls Delhi the city of jinns. It is, I mean, the psychedelic trip part that I was mentioning, it is very, very evident. You step out of your house and it is unbelievable. You just keep walking and all kinds of things you'll start seeing. I've often told myself that in every square inch of Delhi, there is probably more happening than entire countries in Europe. It is that intense. Just all kinds of things. Everyone's selling everything. Here some music is playing, there someone is painting, there someone is doing this. It really is to be experienced. The amount of color as well is something that you will note very, very fast. I have noticed that in Europe, in the West, there is this preference for white or black. At some range between white and black, the kind of clothes people wear, this is something you will notice the first thing you enter into India, this explosion of color. Everyone is wearing all kinds of color, all kinds of jewelry. It is extreme. These are some pictures from, so these scenes you will not see actually in modern Delhi, but these are scenes from my own childhood. So you would have all these itinerant nomadic craftspeople. So these are just street-side astrologers, portable Ferris wheels, of course fruits and veggies on the go, fruit carts, cobblers, snake charmers. In my childhood they were very much part of the Indian landscape, no longer there. Ice creams. In some neighborhoods you will also find these very specialized professions. These guys would run their bicycles and they would have a cutting wheel on the bicycle and they would yell out. All of these have their own little different kinds of calls. And usually women would run out of their houses and this guy would just sharpen your kitchen knives. Right? So he would just run the blade on his little cutting wheel attached to his bicycle and he would sharpen your knife for some rupees or something like that. So this was very much part of the Delhi landscape. Delhi is a very historic city. At minimum, we have 8 historic cities within Delhi. So this we are talking Indraprastha. So recorded history about 2500, 3000 years easily, even Delhi. Recorded history. My own name Arjun comes from the protagonist of the Mahabharata, Arjuna, which is who was part of a family whose capital was in Delhi also, in fact the earliest Delhi, which was at that time called Indraprastha. But yeah, these are all the different cities. I presently live somewhere around here. And as in most historic cities like Rome, you've got all this history, all this poetry always going on. It's a very strange kind of feeling because it is not an easy city to live in, especially if you're coming from the West, especially if you're coming from a city like Chasma. It will be a shock to your system. But over time, what happens is that the poetry starts seeping into you. This kind of history, this kind of historicness, you will not be able to escape it. It's this almost, this feeling of entering into this ancient epic, ancient fairy tale, and you just lose yourself in it. And it starts feeling, in a very funny way, good to be in this kind of super intense chaos. It's not for everyone probably, but that is the feeling most Delhi natives would tell you they have. My own mother is from the older part of Delhi, Shahjahanabad. This is Mughal Delhi, so the 11th to 17th century Delhi, where the Islamic rulers were in charge of India. And when India, I think, was at its heyday, before the British came into India, India in fact held 25% of world GDP at that point. The Mughal Emperor Shah Jahan and his, I would say, Father Jahangir as well, probably the richest men ever in history to live. The kinds of architecture, of course, Shah Jahan built the Taj Mahal as well. And the scale at which this thing is built, did you have a chance to go to the Taj Mahal as well, Raghu? You should have. The scale is immense. As soon as you enter it, it really is unbelievable. It is incredibly big. And just the solidity with which the walls are built, the kind of marble that is glistening all the time there, it is incredible. I highly recommend it. That was also built by Shah Jahan when we were undergoing this golden age in India, where a quarter of the world economy was Indian. This is all old Delhi. Compare this to Chasma. This is old Delhi. So it's just this sea of humanity always rushing into you. And you feel a part of this sea whenever you're traveling through these very olden parts of Delhi. I don't know, everyone is just, it's a very strange and maybe even inexpressible thing to even think about. It's just, you feel a part of the sea of humanity, and at the same time it is quite uncomfortable, of course, because you don't have any personal boundaries in place. But you feel part of humanity, you feel human. Right? That's the thing. And there is a very strong sense of that. You feel a part of this huge other thing. It is quite spiritual, I would say. Now, focusing in on my own community in India. So this is going to be a personal experience, of course. I come from the Jain community, which is Jainism, Hinduism and Buddhism. These would be the three ancient Indian religions. This is, once again, pre-British, pre-Islamic, very, very ancient. My own community, the Jain community, has always been in charge of the money in India. So we've been the financiers of empires, whether it be the Mughals or the British, or before that the Hindu kings. We were in charge of all the accounts and everything, which means that we were also the biggest patrons of art. That is one thing I'm proud of, that my community was always the biggest patrons of art. In terms of literacy and everything, I think even to this date, we have almost a 98% university level literacy in the Jain community. So we are quite highly skilled and of course artistic. The Jains are. Now this is an honorific title which was given to especially male members of the Jain community. Both my father and my grandfather in society would be called Jain Saabs. I unfortunately am not. Only I think a couple of times maybe in my life I've been called a Jain Saab, but I don't remember my dad and my grandfather were always called that. But it's a very respect-worthy title, because as soon as you hear the word or heard the word Jain Saab, what that would imply is that you are in charge of a lot of money, of course, but it is an honorable thing. So the idea of capitalism is very different in the Jain community especially, and in India in general, in that it is not seen as something bad. There is a very healthy version of capitalism in place and has been in place in India for a very long time. The idea was that if you are a person who is intelligent enough, smart enough with money, practical enough, and genuinely would like to take care of your neighbors, of the society, it is a respect-worthy thing for you to be able to control all this money, because you are the one who everyone will trust the most. So if someone calls you a Jain Saab, that would ideally mean that you are the most trustworthy member of society. That is what this Indian capitalism would be. Ahimsa, I would say, is one of the most important principles of Jainism and Indian thought. Non-violence. Mahatma Gandhi himself did grow up in a Jain community. He was not Jain himself, but his neighbors were. And this whole idea of living and letting live is fundamental, I would say. We talked about Old Delhi. It's very interesting how right across the Red Fort, which was the fort of Shah Jahan, this Mughal huge fort, you've got a Jain temple, then you've got a Hindu temple, then you've got a Sikh temple, then you've got a mosque, then you've got a church, all in one row. And for 1,000 years, there was no hatred at all. Everyone was coexisting completely peacefully. And I'm not kidding at all, this is literally right next to each other. In fact, in around the 10th, 11th century, it was very common to have within the same family Hindus, Jains and Buddhists. There was none of that you are a Jain, so you need to have your own family. Everyone was actually within the same family. So there was not even this idea that we belong to different religions. Even that was not there. My own immediate family, so this is also something I'm quite keen on, family history. And I would love to talk to you about this as well, whether this is something that Croatians think about. Not many Indians think about this as well, I have to be honest, but I have recorded history of my family from the early 1700s. And I'm lucky in that my ancestors made it a point to record this history. I know of the migration routes that our family took from the early 1700s, how we came into Delhi, photographs of our ancestral homes. It is a very grounding thing, but I would love to talk to you about that as well, whether family history is as important and whether it is even recorded, whether anyone is actually making an effort to record these things, whether there is an appreciation for this kind of thing. These are some of the architectural places attached to my family, mostly in the north of India. It seems that in the early 1700s we began our journey in the east, on the eastern coast in Odisha. We migrated to Maharashtra in the south, then to Gujarat in the west, and sometime 150 years ago we have been in Delhi. And ours is one of the oldest families in Delhi as well. So we've been in Delhi for more than a century on both sides of my parents, my mother and my father. The Red House is a project that began 4 years ago. I unfortunately lost my father in the COVID pandemic. And my grandfather had begun an electronics factory in the early 1960s in Delhi. And we were one of the first ferrite core transformers producers in India, which is when you had those big color televisions. The kind of transformers that were being used, we were one of the first producers in India. But because of my own very diverse nuclear physics and art and architecture background, running a cultural center seemed to me to be the most natural choice. This is what we've been doing for the last 4 years. The architecture is mostly of my own construction, and the community is very beautiful. This is my house in Delhi. So as you can see, I have 7 Gothic arches from my balcony. This is also something I built in 2017. And as promised, this is the end with a poem by Rabindranath Tagore, who is my favorite poet. And if anyone was to be called the national poet of India, contemporary national poet, I would say he would be Rabindranath Tagore. So thank you very much for coming, and I would love to have any questions at all. Any discussions, any comments, I would love to have them. Thank you. Hvala Boga. Yes, any question? Yeah, it's got such a lot of, I'm not kidding, it's the supercontinent squeezed into this country.
But I promise it to myself, I'm too old to stress myself so much, I don't know, but it's a really imposant and very, very rich of culture and art and culture. This is really, you have to see this, touch it, smell it, to understand much better and go deeper in material, So.
Yeah, so this yes.
I wanted to ask, can you feel the difference between day and night time? Because are there people always on, is that moving all the time?
You mean night time, you're saying?
Night and day?
Yeah.
What's the difference? Because I have a feeling that's always something.
Always. So there would of course be some difference between day and night in the number of people that you're seeing on the streets.
Okay.
But even at night, whatever time you go out, you will always see stuff going on. Always.
So never sleeping.
It is never ever.
Can you compare to maybe another city, maybe European, but from the western side, like something have that energy, let's say?
So I spent 3 years in London, and it has similar energy, but it is of a different kind. It's similar in the sense that London is where it seems to me never sleeps. You have always people outside and of very different communities. But it is different. It's hard to explain just what exactly is different. But in my experience in London, probably nowhere in mainland Europe, I haven't come across any city with that kind of intensity.
Yes, because most of European cities get sleep at some point. You can feel the silence even in the cities.
So I spent the last few days in Zagreb, and even in Zagreb, I think around 10 p.m., 11 p.m., it does go quiet. You don't see as many people. You have the workers and everything all going back home, probably.
Yes.
But it's just a very distinct difference. Yeah, that is not the case in Delhi. No matter where you are. In fact, right opposite my home, in the picture that I sent to you, that I showed you, there is a park, and even at 3 a.m. you will find people in the badminton court. I, in fact, myself have gone out at 3 a.m. and played badminton. It just never goes to sleep.
And another question I wanted to ask about photos from your family you have, like inherited.
Yeah.
Because we have an interesting project in the museum, a colleague of mine is leading it, it's Topotec. It's where humanity digitalized with our help their heritage, like photos and documents, and we put it online for everybody to share, because we notice it's like when digital photograph came at the beginning 2000, a number of physical photographs just disappeared because people are selling houses. I just wanted to ask, maybe it's different perception, I didn't get it well. Is it your case that you have so much things about your family, or does Indian people maybe get cared much more than we here?
Yes.
In that, because some of us have that a string to care about, but most of people at some point forget
That's true. That's
past
exactly
them because life gets you somewhere, so you just.
So what I would say.
Yeah.
Sure.
Same question.
Yeah. So what my experience has been, because I have asked a lot of Indians as well about the same thing. There are some things like birthdays and death days, for example. You have records of these things going back a very, very long time in most families. So you would be able to get records of, let's say, your great grandfather when he died. There will be record for that. The dates at least. But the detail to which I have my own family history recorded, that is rare. That is not the case with most families. I am lucky because my ancestors, two of my ancestors in particular, did this before me. And I could build upon it. Right? So the earliest, and my ancestor, the earliest one who did this 150 years ago. And he actually did make the effort to record this in a little notebook. He collected whatever he could, the little artifacts, documented everyone's professions, the migration routes that he was aware of. And it's a very beautiful thing. The oldest photograph that I have in my family is, I would say, more than a century old. And it's very interesting just how people were posing as well then. It's like this court scene that they were trying to depict, right? So it's like, and everyone lived in joint families then. I'm pretty sure in Croatia as well that would have been the case. So grandparents and your siblings, brothers, sisters, a big house, big family. Children running around here and there. But the portraiture of that period was like a court scene. They would have these bodyguards almost like wearing these gold and bronze shields with swords and everything. And the men would be sitting in the front, the women would be standing, I think, in the back, and the little kids would be in front of them. But they would recreate these court scenes 100 years ago, it seems, in Indian photography at that point.
Yes, it's nice to have something like that because at some point we all turn to our roots, to our family. We get maybe not in our 20s, but in 40s, 50s, you start to ask what happened before you, where the family was. So I thought maybe it's just a bit common for all the families today. So it just depends on the person, family, like here also. Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
But you are right in that it is a very grounding feeling to know where you came from, where your ancestors were. To me personally, and you're completely right in that the older I grow, the more important this seems to be. To understand where actually I am coming from. Because the whole decision, in fact, to go back to India after spending that much time in the UK was a conscious decision. I thought to myself that I was going to the land of my ancestors, to the land of Gandhi and Tagore. And before which I could not reconcile with the thought. I always felt that, the UK, Europe is a much easier place to be in. And it is easy. But there is this sense of history which keeps pulling you back. Always. And there is a poetry to that. It's like you're going back to your parents, right? Your spiritual parents. There is that feeling. There is
again, that belongs like, I don't know, probably blood will get back. I think people were working for the biggest part of their life outside, but at some point you always, where your heart is.
Definitely. Most definitely. And nothing can change that. It's you belong there.
Kako to utječe na unutarnju slobodu, ta povezanost sa predsima?
Yeah, there is definitely that. And it's hard to explain, but it's once again it's this like this parent-child thing. You don't want to lose sight or lose memory of your parents. That's the kind of feeling I have. When I am going back to India, so people like Gandhi, people like Tagore, I genuinely think of as spiritual fathers. It doesn't matter whether we are connected biologically or not. All these connections, all the Mughal monuments, even the British Empire, the Khajuraho sculptures, there is a very strong sense in me that I am part of the same lineage. And it is a very freeing thing because I'm no longer bounded by anything now. This whole this whole stimulation, this whole universality to everything that I have seen and people before me have seen, it is part of me. It's almost like this universal experience where you can feel part of the background, you fade into the background, and this is a very common spiritual, I would say patently Indian experience, where the idea is that you can lose yourself in the background. The complete dismantling of the ego, I do feel it. Whenever I think about India, whenever I think about what has gone on over the centuries, this huge history that we have, it is a freedom. It doesn't feel like bondage, because it really is not a bondage. I am traveling, I am doing everything that I am, but my mind is infinitely more open now, having accepted all of that. I feel very blessed, in fact, in that respect, that I have access to millennia of humanity. My view is not bound by one or two generations. Right? I don't think in terms of what did my parents do, what did my grandparents do, and that is where my time stops. Very genuinely, I have this feeling that I am part of this thousands of years old time frame. And it is a freeing thing. I am not bound by time anymore. I am not bound by space. It is a very freeing thing. My mind is infinitely open.
I would say it's visible because you move from physics to art. It shows a big open mind because it's not transfer from technical stuff to something that's you need to feel art in artistic ways.
No, 100%. In fact, whenever my friends or anyone is asking me about this shift from the sciences to the arts, I'm always telling them that these are just different languages. When I went into nuclear physics, my intention was to solve, as for most people, to solve the existential questions. What does life mean? What does the world mean? At that point, I thought that if I could make myself smart enough, intelligent enough, I could solve it. That's what I thought. That's what young nuclear physics Arjun thought. And when I realized for the first time that it is just another language, right? That the way light is being filtered through the foliage of a tree is also a kind of solution to the kinds of questions I'm asking myself. My world completely changed and I had no need for physics anymore. It's not like I have no regrets of studying it as well. It's just a phase of life. It's just this constant maturity. So it's a very beautiful thing that I can just move around like that and just Europe, India, physics, art, it's all the same to me. We're all part of the same family. There is this very, so we were talking about this West India difference. In the early 1900s, Swami Vivekananda introduced, he gave a lecture in Chicago. And usually how Western lecturers would begin their lectures would be to address everyone as ladies and gentlemen. Now what Swami Vivekananda did was that he addressed his audience as brothers and sisters of America, fellow brothers and sisters of America. And that in itself is hugely telling of the difference between the East and the West. Because ladies and gentlemen, we really, I don't think traditionally believe in this kind of separation that I am here on the stage, I am giving you a lecture and you are listening to me. We are all just brothers and sisters and we are having this informal party. Right? It's just a get together. I think that is what maybe the traditional Indian view would be. And very honestly, I would say that even in this room, I have no conception that you are foreigners or that I am a foreigner here. And I'm saying that very, very honestly, it is like home to me. So that sense inside, that sense of safety, security inside, I think it is coming from there. I don't feel away from home anywhere. My home is that big. My family is that big. I don't feel that I have lost anyone. You see, everyone is a brother, sister, mother, father, whatever. And that's a very strong feeling. It's just a very solid core.
It was very interesting. Thank you for giving us introduction to India. It's of course. I hope I will go someday.
Please do, and if you do,
because I think it's very important for us as human beings to explore and to see something different, because it's the easiest way we learn who we are and what are exceptions in your case, in our case, because you're constantly making comparison.
Absolutely.
You, me. That's, because here you see similarities and different stuff. Because
Absolutely. I agree 100%.
thank you, it was very interesting.
So, ja se nadam da će Ajđur dobiti priliku u kolovozu pričati kako ste bili super publika, isto u Puneu gdje će biti vjerojatno gost od Sudhira, tako da svaka vam čast.
Ja sam htio reći, nismo ništa čuli o samom projektu Red House.
Aha.
Da li eventualno može vrlo, ako imate vremena?
Could you explain a few more things about the Red House and what you make there, everything, what is your program, and so that was a question, the wish.
Okay. So, all kinds of experimental ideas.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have weekly events, so almost every Saturday, Sunday we would have something going on. And so art exhibitions, poetry readings, film screenings, craft workshops, walks through the city, public lectures, travel around India. We do everything. But it is very strong programming in the sense that it is relevant. It's not the same classical music, dance every time. It is answering questions which people actually have in an intelligent and artistic way. That's what we've been doing for the last 4 years, and it's been very successful. In Delhi we have now around 13,000 people associated with us.
How much?
13,000. So it's become very popular. I think we're generally making a change in Delhi, in India, and of course now it seems the world as well. That is very much happening. The whole idea is that you answer questions which are actually relevant in a strong, effective way. It is highly collaborative. We have networks around the world. Friends, networks, collaborators, artists around the world. That's how it's going on. And this is built on the same premises as my grandfather's factory. So that's the family connection.
It's all private,
It is all private.
nothing with government.
So that you picked up on something very beautiful. I think that is why we are able to do how much we are able to do. Because we're never writing for grants, we're never begging the government for funds. All our events are ticketed. And the whole point of the Red House was that I would like my programming to be that strong that people will pay me for it. Because I think if you keep on giving culture for free, it devalues it. Whereas as an artist, I feel that your art should be that good that people will want to pay for it. And if they don't, which means you've got to increase your value as an artist. That has been my whole idea for the last 4 years, and it is working. And I think that is part of the reason why we are so fast as well. Because it is all privately owned and we can very quickly get these things done. So, in fact, I'll give you an example. The very first art exhibition that we did, we in fact collaborated directly with an ex-Supreme Court Justice of Pakistan. And I'm not sure if you're aware of the India-Pakistan situation, but it has been very tense. It's very difficult. And the whole idea was to alert people of Delhi and India that we are speaking the same language. Most of northern India and Pakistanis speak the same language, but we are using different scripts. We would be using the Devanagari script, which is coming from Sanskrit. They speak the exact same language, but with the Farsi script, which they are getting from the Persians, from the Arabs.
Ovo je jako zanimljivo,
Nisam baš sve skužio.
Da, ovo je jako zanimljivo. Znači, sjeverni dio Indije i Pakistan pričaju isti jezik, ali upotrebljavaju različita pisma. Prvo izložbu umjetnosti koju je imalo u Red House-u je bio jedan pakistanski umjetnik, baš zbog te osjetljive situacije između Indije i Pakistana.
Aha, pakistanski umjetnik je bio, a ne, nisu oni ga Pakistan. Okay.
And this was very difficult because we had a right-wing government then, which we still have, and all the journalists were telling me not to do it. But then when we actually did do it, the actual audience, the general public, loved it. Because a lot of people have their ancestors in Pakistan and all of that. We have a shared history. They loved it.
Kad su se pripremali za izložbu, svi su im rekli nemojte to raditi, novinari i ne, ali onda su bili svi na kraju oduševljeni kad su ipak se usudili takvog kraja.
Because the problem is Kashmir.
Yeah.
Still 50 years, maybe more.
It's still going on. It is a very, very tragic situation. Countless people have died. It is extremely sad.
All the time.
So that was my intention, that we need to make everyone understand that we are the same people. We are coming from the same roots. Why are we doing this? Because what the government does, I feel, is that it isolates people and it keeps highlighting the differences all the time, everywhere in the world. And I feel it is up to the part of artists and maybe art institutions which can actually highlight the similarities, even if it's difficult. And I think that is the only real solution to this, that you make the general public aware of how similar everyone is. We are not that different. All kinds, young, old, from all over the country, and more from other parts of the world as well. The whole idea is that we would not like to pigeonhole or niche, we would not like to niche ourselves in any one particular thing. The whole idea is that, let's say you are a piano player. My view is that in order to become a better piano player, you need to visit good quality art exhibitions as well. That's the whole idea, right? So we keep doing these things so that everyone has this well-rounded picture of what is going on. Because usually what happens in art institutions, I find, is that they pick one particular point of view and they will keep on repeating that same thing again and again and again. And this particular institution will keep on repeating their point of view again and again and again. And you have polarization and you have fights. Whereas my thing is that let's talk logically, sensefully and artistically about whatever is going on from all these different points of view. And I will invite them, and it's usually it's a very logical, that's how I choose my collaborators as well. It is not illogical, just protest. They have to make sense, and they have got to be willing to make other people understand their point of view and be able to have a conversation about it. It's not a lecture, it is a conversation. It's this kind of strong network making, right? Because it's like the more I travel, the more I grow up, the more I experience things, I'm constantly just making connections. At this point in my career, I think that is what my work is. It is no longer just painting canvases, it is just making these kinds of connections. And I'm seeing this, I'm seeing this. What can I actually do to connect all of this? So if I've studied nuclear physics, if I know how to do painting, if I know how to do construction, I feel fortunate in that I can speak with equal facility to nuclear physicists as well as construction laborers. I know what their worlds look like. I have done that myself. And I think that is why the whole Red House thing is going on. Because I don't have that kind of pretentiousness or ego in me. I really don't. It's just like everyone is the same, we're just doing different kinds of things. But oftentimes I feel that people have very narrow visions. So if you're, let's say, a physicist, you will always be hanging out with other physicists and you have no idea what is going on in the construction laborer's life. You have no idea, you don't care about it. There is no conversation going on, zero. Absolutely zero. And I think that's where most of the problems are coming from. Because no one is talking to each other.
You are big in London. What is now relationships people from India and from Britain or Commonwealth?
Yeah, that's a very good question because it feels to me that we have turned the tables. The national dish, the national cuisine of the UK now is the chicken tikka masala, which is Indian. The richest people in the UK, all Indian.
But what people in India thinking about Britons and Poland?
I don't think we think that much about the British anymore. I think it's just become like this. I mean, a lot of people go there to study still, but we don't have a very strained relationship. It's just normal. It's just another country now. We often just laugh about this fact that so many Indians are there in the UK now, and at least in terms of money, we are making so much more money than the native population. So we just laugh about it, really. Yeah. It is very funny to me, yeah. When I went to the UK, all the best houses, all the best cars, everything is Indian. So it's like you've taken our vengeance.
Dragi ljudi, svaka čast, što ste došli, hvala puno. Dear Arjun, thank you so much for your conversation, not lecture.